"You know what your problem is?" my sister-in-law said, tilting her head the way people do when they're about to say something they've been rehearsing. "You've always been jealous of what my husband has built. It must be exhausting. Showing up to places like this and that." She gestured at my outfit. A navy blazer, dark jeans, clean white sneakers. I dressed down on purpose. I always do. She waited for me to watch instead. It was 4:47 p.m. I gave myself until 5. Before I tell you what happened in those 13 minutes, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I want to know how far this story travels. The party was my parents' 35th anniversary celebration. My brother had insisted on throwing it. He'd rented out the private event room at a restaurant called the Alderton, a converted brick building downtown with exposed wood beams and Edison bulbs and a prix-fixe menu that started at $90 a head. He'd told our parents he was treating them. He told the guests it was an intimate family gathering. He told my sister-in-law it was his idea. None of those things were entirely true, but I'll get to that. I had driven 3 hours to be there. I had left my dog with a neighbor, canceled a call I'd been trying to schedule for 6 weeks, and shown up with a card and a gift and a genuine desire to see my parents be celebrated. That's it. That was my whole agenda. I should have known the evening would go sideways when I walked in and my sister-in-law, I'll call her what she is, my brother's wife, greeted me at the door not with hello but with the visual scan, up, down, the faint curl of a lip. Her name is Renata. No, wait, that's in the list. Her name is Sorel. She has the kind of beauty that knows it's being watched and performs accordingly. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, and she wanted everyone in the room to know it without her having to say it. She'd spent the past 3 years making sure I knew my place in the family hierarchy, which was below her, slightly above irrelevant. My brother's name is, I'll call him what I've always called him, my brother, because that's the only name that matters for this story, and by the end of it, even that will feel like a technicality. He'd done well. That's just the official version. He'd started a consulting firm 6 years ago, grown it to 30 employees, and built a reputation in the city as the kind of guy who knew people. He drove a car that announced him before he walked into rooms. He wore his success like a second skin, effortlessly, the way people do when they've decided confidence is a performance. What the guests at that anniversary party didn't know, what my parents didn't fully know, what Sorel absolutely didn't know, was that the consulting firm my brother had built, the one with the sleek website and the downtown office and the framed press features, existed in its current form because of me, not because I worked there, because I owned a piece of it. Let me back up. 8 years ago, my brother came to me with a pitch deck and a dream and $6,000 in credit card debt. I was 24. I had just spent 2 years after college doing every freelance job I could find. Copywriting, bookkeeping, grant writing for nonprofits, whatever paid. I was living in a one-bedroom apartment with a mattress on the floor and a second-hand desk I'd carried up 3 flights of stairs by myself. I had managed, through obsessive frugality and a part-time job even after I got a full-time one, to save $22,000. It was not a lot. It was also everything. He asked for $15,000. He framed it as a loan. He had documents, a repayment schedule, terms. I read them carefully, which he found both amusing and slightly annoying. He kept saying, "It's family, it doesn't need to be formal." And I told him that if we were going to do this, we were going to do it right. I crossed out the loan structure. I wrote in equity, 10% of the firm, in exchange for $15,000, vesting over 4 years. He signed it because he needed the money. I think he also believed genuinely that the firm wouldn't amount to much, and 10% of nothing was nothing. He was wrong about that. What I was not wrong about was keeping quiet. I had learned early in my family that money changed things, not just circumstances, relationships, perceptions, the way people treated you in rooms. When my brother started doing well, he started doing well publicly, loudly, in ways that required an audience. He bought my parents a new refrigerator and told the story at every dinner for a year. He upgraded Sorel's car and let her post about it. He paid for a vacation and made sure everyone knew whose generosity made it possible. I did not operate that way. I also did not, until that evening at the Alderton, realize how badly my silence had cost me. Sorel made the comment about my jacket at 4:47. She said it casually to a cluster of my parents' friends who had gathered near the entrance. Not a whisper, not a private dig, a performance. She's always been more of a, she paused, choosing the word with care, practical dresser. Nothing wrong with that. The nothing wrong with that landed like an elbow to the ribs. The cluster laughed softly. The polite social laugh that says I heard it and I'm choosing the side that has the better catering. My mother was 20 feet away. She heard. She looked at her hands. My brother was standing at the bar. He caught my eye over Sorel's shoulder. He smiled his social smile, the one he'd been practicing since we were teenagers, and turned back to his conversation. That was the moment something in me stopped being patient. I have spent a significant portion of my adult life being the quiet one. In family photos, I'm the one slightly to the side, the one not angled toward the camera. At dinners, I'm the one who asks questions and remembers the answers, and doesn't talk about myself unless directly asked. I was raised to believe that humility was a virtue, and that softness was not weakness, and that the people who truly had something didn't need to announce it. I still believe all of that. But I have also learned, the slow, expensive way, that humility can become a hiding place. That softness, if you're not careful, becomes the thing other people wipe their hands on. I excused myself and found a chair near the window, at the edge of the room where the caterers were moving in and out with trays. I sat down and I let myself go quiet in a different way. Not the accommodating quiet I'd performed all evening. A different kind. I opened the notes app on my phone. I looked across the room at the party my brother had arranged, the flowers he'd ordered, the custom centerpieces with my parents' wedding photo, the guests laughing and eating and holding glasses of wine that had been selected and paid for. And I did the accounting. It's a specific kind of math that I don't think anyone teaches you. The invisible ledger. The one you keep without meaning to, that tallies every transaction between you and the people who are supposed to love you. Not the money ones, though those are in there too, but the others. The times you showed up and they didn't. The times you absorbed the cost of their comfort in ways that never appeared on any balance sheet. I thought about the $15,000. I thought about the afternoon 2 years after I'd signed that equity agreement when my brother called me from the hospital parking lot because Sorrel had needed a procedure that their insurance wouldn't cover and they were short $4,000. I had $4,000. He said he'd pay me back within 6 months. He did not pay me back within 6 months. He did not pay me back at all. When I brought it up 18 months later, he looked genuinely confused. The way people look when they've reclassified a debt as a gift inside their own heads without informing the lender. I thought about my parents' roof. 3 years ago, there was a leak, a bad one. My parents are not poor, but they are not liquid. They have a house and a pension and not much room in between. The estimate came in at $11,400. My brother said he'd chip in $2,000 when he could. I paid the remaining $9,000. I didn't tell anyone. I told myself it was just what you do. I told myself the same thing I always told myself, that you help the people you love because you love them, not because of what they'll do with the information. I thought about the phone call I got from my father 8 months ago. He hadn't called to check in. He hadn't called to talk. He called because my brother's firm was facing a cash flow problem. A big client had delayed payment, and they had payroll coming up, and could I help? Just this once, just bridge money. He'd asked my brother to repay me directly. I wired $8,000. My brother never mentioned it. Not a call, not a text, not a thank you at the next family dinner. When I saw him 2 months later, he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Good to see you. How's everything going?" Like we were coworkers running into each other in a hallway. Sitting by that window, I added it up for the first time, all of it. The equity stake never acknowledged, the loan never repaid, the roof, the bridge money, the years of Sorrel's small cruelties that my brother had watched and said nothing about because the math worked out better for him if I stayed small. The number was significant. It was also irrelevant, in a way, because it wasn't the money I was sitting there grieving. It was the realization that I had spent years making myself palatable by making myself invisible, and they had taken my invisibility as evidence that I didn't matter. That I was, as Sorrel had implied to the room 20 minutes ago, practical, sensible. The kind of woman you didn't need to worry about because she didn't need much. I had confused self-sufficiency with expendability. I wasn't going to do that anymore. I set down my phone and looked across the room. My brother was toasting my parents. He was speaking about legacy, about the family he'd built on their foundation, about what it meant to carry their name forward. He was charming and warm, and he meant about 40% of it, which was probably the best he could do. Sorrel was watching him with the focused attention of someone who has invested heavily in a particular outcome. And I thought, they have no idea. Not just about the equity stake. About everything. About the morning I drove 4 hours round trip to sit with my mother after a scare that turned out to be nothing but felt like everything. And didn't tell anyone because I didn't want it to become a thing. About the weekend I spent on the phone with a contractor negotiating that roof repair, down from $14,000 to $11,400, because I knew $14,000 was too much, and I was willing to do the work. About the years I'd lived without the things I'd earned, because I'd handed the money to people who needed it more than I let myself admit I needed it. About the fact that I wasn't just an equity holder in my brother's consulting firm. I was its largest outside investor. After the initial $15,000 stake, there had been a second round 2 years in, when my brother was trying to grow and needed capital, and I was the only one who'd said yes. I'd written a check for $40,000. 30% of the firm cumulative. The documents were clean. The lawyers, my lawyers, not his, had reviewed everything. He had signed those too. He had signed them the same way he'd signed the first ones, because he needed the money, because he was confident it would all work out, and because he had fundamentally never taken seriously the possibility that I might one day be in a room holding 30% of everything he'd built and deciding what to do with it. My brother finished his toast. The room applauded. My mother was crying, the good kind that comes from being genuinely moved, and my father had his arm around her shoulders and was looking at his son with the particular pride of a parent who believes the story they're being told. I stood up. I hadn't planned to. I want to be honest about that. I had planned to sit with my accounting, let the evening end, drive 3 hours home, and figure out my next move from a place of distance and deliberation. But then Sorrel caught my eye across the room, and she smiled. Not the social smile, the other one, the one that said, "I see you. I've always seen you, and I know exactly where you sit." I picked up my glass and walked to the front of the room. My brother saw me moving and his expression shifted, a flicker of something, not quite alarm, not quite curiosity. He angled his body slightly, a subtle blocking gesture, the kind people do without knowing they're doing it. I stepped around him. "I want to say something," I said. My voice was even. It filled the room without effort, which surprised me, because I had spent so many years making it smaller in spaces like this one. The room went quiet, not the anticipatory quiet of a toast, the uncertain quiet of a room that doesn't know what it's about to hear. My mother looked at me. Her eyes were still wet. "Mom, Dad," I said. 35 years. I've been thinking about what that means. I paused. "It means you built something, quietly, without needing everyone in the room to know the cost of it. You put your kids through school. You kept the lights on through every hard year. You didn't ask for credit. You just continued." My father made a sound, the kind men of his generation make when they're moved and don't know what to do with it. "I learned that from you," I said. The continuing, the doing the thing without the announcement. Sorrel shifted. She could feel it, the room's attention recalibrating. "I've been thinking tonight," I said, "about what it means to build something. My brother has done that. He has genuinely done that, and I mean it." I looked at him. He nodded, guarded. "But I want to be honest with our parents tonight, because I think they deserve honesty. The firm he built, he didn't build it alone." The room held its breath. "I've been a 30% equity stakeholder in my brother's consulting firm for the past 6 years. I said it the same way I would say I take my coffee black or I grew up in this city. As a fact. Not a weapon, just a fact. I've invested just over $55,000 in that business across 2 rounds. My brother's success is, in part, something I helped make possible. And I don't say that to diminish what he's built, because the work was his. But I've spent 6 years being the quiet one in this family, and I'm done with that particular performance." I heard Sorrel pull a sharp breath. I turned to look at her. "You made a comment earlier about my jacket." She laughed, a quick, reflexive sound. "It was a joke. I know what it was," I said. Not unkindly, factually. "I also know why you make those jokes. I've watched you take stock of rooms for 3 years, Sorrel. You're good at it. You find the person with the least visible power, and you use them to make yourself larger. I get it. I've watched enough people do it to understand the mechanics." I let that sit for a second. "I'm just letting you know that your math was off tonight." My brother stepped forward. "That's enough. I'm almost done," I said, and something in my voice, the steadiness maybe, or the complete absence of anger, stopped him. "I'm not here to blow anything up. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm trying to tell our parents the truth on the night they're being celebrated, which is that this family didn't succeed in spite of its quiet members. It succeeded because of them." I turned back to my parents. "I paid for the roof," I said. My mother's mouth opened slightly. 3 years ago, the whole thing. Not the 2,000 your son offered, the 9,400 that was left. I didn't say anything because I didn't want it to be a thing. But it was a thing, and it was mine, and I'm allowed to say so. My father was very still. "I don't want credit," I said. Honestly, I want to stop being the person in this family who disappears into the walls so everyone else can be comfortable. I want to sit at the table. The actual table, not the edge of the room by the caterers. And I want my niece, when she's old enough, to know that the women in this family who mattered weren't just the ones who were loud about it." The room was very quiet. My brother looked at me for a long moment. I could see him running calculations. What to dispute, what to concede, whether he could do damage control in real time. He's smart. He knew he couldn't. Sorrel was looking at her hands. My mother stood up. She crossed the room and put her arms around me and held on in the way she used to when I was small and had fallen, and she was reminding me that I was still intact. I had not expected to feel it in my throat, but I did. "I didn't know about the roof," she said, quietly, against my shoulder. "I know," I said. "Why didn't you say anything?" I thought about all the reasons. The desire to be needed without being a burden. The belief that love was something you demonstrated through sacrifice, not through asking to be seen. The habit, built over decades, of making myself the background. "I thought that was just how you did it," I said. "I think I got that from you." She pulled back and looked at me and laughed, the surprised, catching kind of laugh that sounds like something releasing. And then she was crying again, and my father had gotten up from his seat, and the room around us had dissolved into that specific texture that anniversary parties sometimes reach if everything goes right. The texture of something real happening in public. The guests gave us space. The caterers kept moving. Sorrel slipped toward the bar and stood there with her back to the room for a while. My brother found me later, when the speeches were done and the cake had been cut and the party was beginning to loosen into something more relaxed. He came and stood next to me near the window, where I'd done my accounting an hour earlier. He was quiet for a moment, then the 55,000. "Yes, I know," he said. He said it differently than he'd said anything else all evening, not the performing voice. The other one, the one I remembered from when we were kids and he was scared of something and hadn't learned yet to hide it. I've known what you put in. I just didn't know how to. I didn't make it right. No, I said. You didn't. I'll make it right. I looked at him. I've spent a long time trying to decide what I believe about people. About whether they change, whether awareness of a debt is the same as the willingness to settle it, whether love and accountability can exist in the same sentence. I don't know if my brother will follow through. I don't know if Sorrel will be different at the next family gathering, or if the warmth I'd seen crack through her composure tonight will seal back over by the weekend. I don't know if my father will ever be able to say out loud that he leaned harder on me than I should have been leaned on, or if my mother will call me next week and ask why I never said anything before. What I know is this. I drove 3 hours home in the dark with the windows down and the radio off, and I felt not vindicated exactly. That's not the right word. I felt located. Like something that had been slightly out of alignment for years had clicked back into its correct position with a sound only I could hear. I had spent so long being the woman who held things up in the dark that I'd started to believe the darkness was where I belonged, that my power only counted if it was invisible, that love, given quietly enough, would eventually be recognized without ever being named. I was wrong about that. Some debts need to be spoken to be real. Some ledgers need to be opened in the light. I didn't go to that party to collect anything. I went to celebrate 35 years of two people who taught me, without meaning to, that endurance was its own kind of strength. And somewhere between the wine glasses and the Edison bulbs and Sorrel's practiced little smile, I stopped enduring and started taking up space. I haven't heard from my brother since that night. It's been 11 days. I'm not waiting. I have a meeting next week with the firm's accountant. My own, not the shared one. And we're going to do a proper valuation and figure out what the equity is actually worth and what my options are. I'm not burning anything down. But I'm done building in the dark. The roof is still standing. It was good work. I know because I made sure of it. And when my niece is old enough, I'm going to tell her about the night I stood in a room full of people who had decided I was the least important person in it. And I opened my mouth, and I told the truth, and the truth was enough. Sometimes that's the only thing that ever is.